The South African government and organised business agreed to work together to drive economic growth. CEOs of South Africa's largest companies have committed to the contribution of considerable skills and resources to address key priorities. Let's bring in Coovadia now, who's the CEO of Business Unity South Africa, for more insights on that conversation with the President. Mr. Coovadia, thank you. What did your meeting with the President resolve on? What was your message to him as business?
Well, the meeting on Tuesday was specifically to put a structure for the partnership between business and government to the President, a structure that we had worked through his technical people. And the idea was that if the President accepts the structure and signs off on the structure, we can then start working together on the three critical areas we have identified, which is energy, logistics, and law and order, because we believe these are critical for business, they're critical for this country and in the national interest, and we need to work together because government has a critical role to play in all three of those areas. But business has indicated that we are keen on working in partnership with government to make resources and capacity available in business to government to enable government to do what is their responsibility. We don't want to take over what government should be doing. We want to add value to that, and we want to aim to try and open up as much space for business, for the private sector, to participate in all three of those critical areas and bring their resources and capacity to bear.
Yeah, you've mentioned some of the challenges, the energy crisis, challenges around transport and logistics. You have crime and corruption. So what's the plan and what help can you offer as business?
Well, look, now that the structure has been agreed, we are awaiting names from government for their people, and then the teams will get together and work out critical deliverables, what time frame and so on, and what work needs to be done to actually tell the President these are the 3 or 4 critical interventions in each of these areas that will actually move the dial on investment and growth. As an example, I think we've made quite a lot of progress in energy. So as an example in energy, through the Energy Council, business is working with ESCOM and the Minister of Electricity and has already identified capacity to put into some of the power stations to do what is necessary to get the power stations to work optimally and generate as much energy as possible. We've also put together something called the Resource Mobilization Fund at the request from the President that he needs capacity in the National Energy Crisis Committee in his office, to implement his energy plan. And we raised funds from a global foundation and from South African business to secure that expertise and donate it to NECOM. And those experts will be in place in the next week or 2 weeks at the most. So that's an example of what we can do, what we are doing. And in logistics, we want to work with Transnet to see if we can play a bigger role in some of the areas that Transnet is responsible for. Want to try and see how we can get the rail system going so that we can get goods traffic off our roads and back onto rail. We want to work with Transnet to look at the problems at our ports. There was a time when our ports were the most competitive on the continent. They are no longer the most competitive nor the most efficient. And so those are examples of what we can do. But now that the structure is together, the two teams from both government and business will get together and identify the specific deliverables.
Yeah, one of the issues government has and admits to struggling with this is that issue of implementation. I think every time after a meeting between government and business, their statement says both have agreed to urgently work together to remove this or that obstacle in order to contribute towards inclusive economic growth and job creation. But the obstacles remain until another commitment is made. So is this going to be implemented? Do you get a sense that there's appetite from government to finally really address and face this head on?
Look, at the meeting on Tuesday, the President was very clear that he's spoken to his team. He's instructed his team to work with us urgently. He's indicated to his team that he wants urgent implementation. He wants us both to report back to him in every 6 weeks at the Union Building in person. We had at the meeting about 5 or 6 ministers. We had about 3 generals from the security cluster. We had the security advisor to the president. We had the acting CEO of ESCOM. So there certainly seems to be a real commitment on the part of government to make this work. Business has been committed for the last year or so. In fact, a year and a half or so since we first put this to the President in January 2022. And we remain committed, and we will certainly put our shoulders to the wheel. Let's see how it goes. I think that, the downside is that if we don't work together to address these issues, the consequences of that for the country could be very severe. I think that given the situation the country is in, currently the crises we have, we do need to bring the best resources and capacity available in the country to bear. And we need to be committed to this. Now, we can talk about, we met in the past and things haven't happened, and I'm not going to argue against that. But I think that we certainly saw a commitment. We certainly saw the President being very serious about this on Tuesday. We remain serious about it, and I think that we need to get into practical mode now, put the technical people together, get work plans drawn up for each of these areas, capacitate and support the work stream so that they can get working. And then, let's see what happens in the next few months. We absolutely clear that we will be transparent about progress here, certainly from business's point of view. And civil society and the public must track that and hold us accountable.
Yeah, and some of the things are obviously outside of what you can do as business, outside of your control. Things like creating an environment that is conducive for business in this country. And I'm just wondering, we've seen government have its own goals, whether you look at what happens at ESCOM, issues around policy uncertainty. So what is it that you think government needs to do, so far apart from this committee where you'll be working with them, what they on their own need to do to make it easy to do business and help in implementing those reforms?
Well, I think that even within the context of the 3 areas that we're committing to work on together, I think government needs to ensure, and as part of this process, we will certainly continue to engage them on that. They need to ensure that, one, we don't do anything that actually detracts from this partnership, that we don't have any more own goals, that policy needs to actually promote what we are trying to do practically in this partnership. And if there's any policy being considered or any policy at the moment that actually detracts from that, it must be reconsidered by government because it's in government's hands. I think that we need to ensure that we track this on an ongoing basis and that the President does hold the relevant people in government accountable. And we need to see that, and I think the public needs to see that, just as we must hold our people accountable. I think that if we can make progress and we can have a joint narrative that says that this is producing real results and we can show those real results, I think we can increase confidence in the country. That in itself will help us increase investment because potential investors will see this happening and will begin to become more confident about investing. But government at the end of the day needs to ensure that an appropriate policy and legislative environment promotes the work we are doing. If a policy and legislative environment actually inhibits the work we are doing, then we're not going to be successful in that, and we will continue to engage government in this. So the policy and legislative environment must be informed by the work we are doing, in the sense that if we agree that we need to have a particular objective, as we work at it, we find a policy blockage to that, then we expect government to unblock that and change that policy if necessary, or change that policy, legislation if necessary. And there's got to be that sort of a dynamic between the real work and the real deliverables and the policy and legislative environment.
Yeah. And just lastly, on the funds that may be raised in this partnership between government and business, what are the plans to safeguard that from corruption? It is a legitimate concern. When it comes to, history has really taught us that you've got to be quite cautious.
Yeah, so we'll use the example of the Resource Mobilization Fund that we put together. What we've done on raising the funds for the expertise in NICOM, we raised the funds. The Resource Mobilization Fund is a not-for-profit, was a board made up of private sector people and one appointee from government, not within government, but a person appointed by government. The board is independent. The funds and the Resource Mobilization Fund does two things. One, it raises the money independently and transparently. We've then put together a procurement team with senior procurement people from a number of corporates, that on the basis of expertise identified by NICOM and through an open RFP process, we interview people, we interview firms, we arrive at shortlists, we put that shortlist through ethical checks, and once we're happy with all of that, and government is also happy with the people that we've identified, we then donate those firms into NICOM. There's no collection and no control of money by government. And we will do the same if we need to raise money for the logistics and law and order. The RMF board has agreed that if a call is made, on the basis that we're making real progress, if a call is made for resources, we can use the Resource Mobilization Fund to do that.
Coovadia, CEO at Business Unity South Africa, thank you.